So my name is Kate Sanders, and I am an instructional strategist for Wayside Publishing. I've spent the last 17 years in education, teaching high school Spanish and in administration. And I'm up in Massachusetts, and I'd like to introduce Lexi Boucher.
Hi, I'm Lexi. I live in Oregon. Last year was my 10th year teaching Spanish in public high schools. In the last 3 years, I actually taught with EntreCulturas, and I joined the team here at Wayside in July, and I'm really excited to share some tips with you today.
Excellent. And we also have our incredible producer, Kelsey Katina, here with us today, and she's going to be helping us out, manning the chat, answering your questions, and helping us out along the way. So we do want to just take a moment to acknowledge the state of the teaching world. All three of us have had experience in pandemic teaching and have only all recently left the classroom. So we truly do understand and appreciate the things that you're doing in your classroom each and every day. And we completely know and understand how incredibly challenging this time is for you. And we want to support you, which is a lot of the reason why we put these PD sessions together, so that you can have some concrete information and some free resources as well. So we really do hope that it helps you. So for this month, the month of January, we chose to plan a 3-part professional development series, all based around unit design. And our 3-part series uses a collaborative approach designed to take you from theory to practice on creating effective proficiency-based units for your students. Now, unit planning can be daunting, but we aim to help you understand the importance of it. So we put together our 3 sessions. Now, if you joined us last week, welcome back. We know that our amazing colleagues, Carolyn and Michelle, presented on the principles of backwards design with you. They basically were showing you the why behind designing a proficiency-based unit. Today, we're going to focus on the how as we go through the design process with you step by step to guide you in crafting a perfect unit. Finally, next week, we'll have our last leg of our trip, and we'll meet you again, hopefully, on January 27th, so that we can share and discuss the highlights of your journey as you plan your unit. So we do hope you can join us next week. And if you haven't already, we really encourage you to head over to the Wayside PD website and sign up for next week's session as well. So Kelsey's going to put the link to next week's registration in the chat for you, and we really hope to see you there. So for today's session, we've provided you a workbook to follow along with everything that Lexi and I discuss. You can use it to note important takeaways or walk through our session with us, and you can always refer back to it as needed. This is different from the workbook. If you were with us last week, this is part 2 of the workbooks. There'll be 3 in all. And you may even want to use this workbook as parts maybe for a basis for PLC discussions once you go back to school next week or this week. You can access an entire folder of resources that we put together for you, including this workbook and some additional resources, by scanning the QR code there right now or going to the tiny URL that Kelsey will now put in the chat. So one thing to note, our workbook has been composed as an editable PDF for you. So that way you can actually type right in it. The thing we want to call to your attention, though, is when you go to that link and open up the document, it's going to prompt you to download the workbook. So we want you to find the little download button in the top right. You're going to download that workbook, and then you have to open it up from your device. So if you're on a computer, you have to go into the files, open it up. Once you open it up, you'll have the capability to type right in that PDF. The biggest thing is if you don't download it, you won't be able to type in it. If you have any trouble with that, you can shoot Kelsey a message, a direct message, and she will help you out with that as well. All right, so our agenda for this evening is as follows. We're going to do a quick review of last week's session, and then we're going to walk you through step by step to set up a unit. And Lexi is going to be our facilitator as she walks through each piece and their importance of building a good unit. So with that, let's get going. So we're going to start by just a brief refresher of the 3 stages of backwards design. Now, this is the information that Carolyn and Michelle shared with you last week. If you were unable to attend last week's meeting, we actually have posted the entire video on our Wayside website under the Professional Development tab. You can access it through the tiny URL that's on the screen now. So if you'd like, you can check out that video maybe afterwards or sometime this week, and that way you get the full picture of the 3 sessions. So in terms of backwards design has 3 steps. Stage 1 is to identify the desired results. What are your goals? Where are you going? And what will you be able to do when you get there? Think about it in terms of you wouldn't plan a trip or a flight if you didn't know where you were going to land, right? And that's stage 1, planning with the end in mind. Now, stage 2, after you've already thought, what is my goal? It's at that point that you have to determine what the acceptable evidence is going to be. How are you going to know whether or not that goal you set in stage 1 has been reached? And in most cases for teachers, that's going to be some sort of assessment. And then finally, in stage 3, it's time to plan all of the daily lessons that you'll prepare for your students. And you want to be thinking of what's going to prepare my students to be successful on that assessment that you thought up in stage 2, which will then prove that you've met the goal that you set for yourself in stage 1. So that's just a brief overview of the 3 steps to backwards design. And again, feel free to watch that session 1 video. You can find that on our website. So one of the things that we're going to be working with today is a free unit plan template that we put together for you. You can find that unit plan template in 2 different places. It is in your workbook in its entirety so that you can print it out or photocopy it however you'd like and write right on it. It is in an editable PDF form in pieces in your workbook. And we've also put it in a Google Doc or a Word document in that resources folder. So there's a couple different ways that you can access that. For today, you may just want to follow along the workbook as we chunk it out in different pieces and put in your own information as you've kind of figured it all out at the end. So now Lexi's going to take over and she's going to start walking you through the unit planner. So thanks, Lexi, take it away.
All right, thank you so much. So no matter where you're at today in planning for a lesson, maybe that's coming up, you have some options to engage with this presentation. So I'm going to be using a unit from EntreCulturas 2 to show you, which are level 2 Spanish text. So you could open the template, there's links in the chat, and fill out the same unit that I'm demonstrating, especially if you are going to teach EntreCulturas Unidad 4 anytime soon. If you know what unit you want to plan and you know where to find your EntreCulturas or EntreCulture resources, you could also work on your own unit if you want to. Or you could just follow along, watch, and ask questions as they come up. Please feel free to leave questions in the chat and somebody from our team will respond or pass them on to us. I also want to mention, I'm going to go a little fast today to ensure that we cover everything in our time, but please remember this will be recorded. So if you want to go back and watch parts that you missed to help you fill out that unit planner, you're more than welcome to open it and rewatch after we post it. So we're going to start off setting our coordinates here, and we needed to identify where we are. So like I said, for this demo, I'm going to be using EntreCulturas 2 Unidad 4, because if I were teaching this year with Spanish 2, here in Oregon, our second semester starts end of January, beginning of February. So I'd be starting this unit in a couple of weeks. And for your planner, you might choose to look at a different unit that you have coming up. Also, I want to point out if you're a French teacher, so I'm going to be using our Spanish series to fill this out, but if you're a French teacher, if you look at page 4 in the workbook, there are French-Spanish equivalents. So if I'm mentioning like the así se dice section, for example, you know that that's the comment dit-on in the French series. All right, so I need to find my unit title and my unit theme. So I'm going to head up to my learning site, and I'm going to click on my Explorer course for EntreCulturas 2. And then I always like to plan from the flex text. So remember, the flex text is your online textbook. And I like to plan from the teacher edition. So the reason when I was teaching with EntreCulturas, I really like using that flex text because all of the links are right there. And it's just like having the textbook open in front of me. It's just on the computer and it's clickable. So that's one tip that I really like to share with teachers, is having that flex text open is your best friend. So I'm going to use that menu on the side and find Unidad Cuatro. And then scroll down, I can see my unit title right there. And if I scroll through this unit opener, I can see all the information briefly about what this chapter is going to cover, including a bunch of helpful teacher's notes. So I kind of get an idea of what we're going to be looking at in Unidad Cuatro right here. So another great place to look is in the front matter of the textbook. If you go to the table of contents, flex text or physical textbook, the table of contents page for that unit, so I'm looking for Unidad Cuatro again, is going to have a good overview as well of the content that will come up in that unit. So by looking in those two places, I can see that the unit title is En la cocina de mi abuela. And based on those summaries that I read, I know we're going to be talking about food, health, and El Caribe, or Spanish-speaking countries in the Caribbean. So that's my first step to get me oriented. Now, the next thing to think about is how long your unit will last. And that's really going to depend on your department. So for me, I taught on a block schedule. I saw my students every other day, and I really want my unit a little bit of an idea of how much I'm going to try to use for this particular unit. There's a calendar template in the workbook and attached to this unit planner. So if you have those documents open, if you scroll down, this calendar will be in there. We also have another calendar in that Google folder as well. So we'll get to the calendars more at the end, because that's actually kind of one of the last stages of planning once we get all those other pieces in there. All right, now we're ready for step one, which is identifying our desired results. So it's really important to have good, strong, essential questions, unit goals, and can-do statements to guide your unit and to guide your planning. If you're using EntreCulturas and EntreCultures, it's very easy to find those. So let's find them for this unit. So we're looking at essential questions, unit goals, can-do statements, and I'm going to head back to my flex text and my teacher's edition. So in this unit opener we were looking at before, you can see the unit goals are right here. And you can also see the essential questions. However, I cannot copy and paste from here, but I'll show you where you can copy and paste. If you click on the content tab, remember the content tab is where everything is housed. All the documents, videos, any type of resource that you need is going to be in the content tab. So if I click on my unit, right there at the beginning of this unit folder are the unit goals that I can actually copy and paste. So I'm just going to copy and paste those right into my document. Now for our essential questions, right underneath that, there's a forum called Preguntas Esenciales. And same thing, it will have the essential questions right there that you can copy and paste as well. So I'm just going to copy those right into my document. Fun fact about Google Docs, if your formatting gets messed up, if you highlight it and go find the little T icon with a slash through it, it will fix all the formatting for you. Now we're going to go look for our can-do statements. So when you're flipping through the textbook, you're going to find those can-do statements everywhere. We have intercultural and communicative can-do statements throughout both series. So we're going to look at an example here. I'm just picking a random page. They're in these teal boxes. So it's nice they're spread throughout. However, if you're trying to make a list, it's going to be time consuming to flip through and try and find all of them. However, if you go to the content tab and go to your resources folder, and then go down to the Mi Progreso, there will be folders with PDFs of the can-do statements. So I'm going to look for Unidad 4, open that. And now I have a list of all the communicative and intercultural can-do statements for that unit in one document. Now, because it's a PDF, I can actually grab this link right here. So I can just copy that link and I can go back to my document and I can actually link that PDF directly into my document. So that's really good to remember, that you can use those links for PDFs and hide them in places. Like I'd put them in my slideshows or, put them in documents, and that way they're really easy to find later on. So yeah, anytime you got that PDF, grab that URL and paste it in there. The next section are standards. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about standards just because it varies so much by state. In the workbook that you have, you will actually find some links to resources for state and ACTFL standards. So if you're not sure what standards you're following, you can probably find some help with those links. So I'm from Oregon, and what we would do is for Spanish 2, for example, I would just take the standards for novice mid. There'd only be 3, 1 in each mode of communication. And I would just put it in my unit plan for the year, and those would be the same 3 standards that I would work off of all year. So depending on what standards your department or your school has agreed on, maybe they stay the same the whole year and you can just leave them in that document. All right, so we have our step 1 complete. We've got those essential questions, the unit goals, can-do statements, standards. Though that's really our compass. That's really what's going to guide this whole unit. So when we're planning, we want to make sure that we keep those at the forefront of our mind. Now we're going to move on to step 2, which is determining acceptable evidence. So when I was teaching with EntreCulturas, for me, that's going to be our IPA, the Integrated Performance Assessments, at the end of the unit. So my first step in finding more information about these is to, okay, so we're looking for our IPA context, our summative assessment description, IPA context and rubric. So the first place I'm going to go, again, my flex text to help me plan. So I'm going to go to Unit 4, Unidad 4, and I'm going to scroll down to Vive EntreCulturas. That's the name of our IPA formative or summative assessment in the Spanish series. So here I can see a description and I can read the context for this particular assessment. So remember, both in the French and Spanish series, we have descriptions of the entire integrated performance assessment in the textbook. So you can go read a brief description, your students can go read a brief description at any time. All those specific resources they need, though, are going to be in the learning site. So it's nice to have that there and remind your students that it's there so they kind of have that beacon the whole time they're working through this unit. So I'm going to read the description. I'm also going to read some of the teacher's notes, get some ideas for what this integrated performance assessment is all about. So in this case, remember we're in the El Caribe, in the Caribbean. So in this case, the student is studying in Cuba with classmates, staying with host families. Last night, a bunch of them went out and it rained and they got sick. And so now they call you in the morning to tell you they aren't coming to class. That's our context for this IPA. So now we're going to go find our rubric. And to find the rubric, I'm going to go to my content tab and go into my folder. And then, oops, I paused it at the wrong place. So I'm going to just scroll down at the bottom of Unidad 4, find my Vive EntreCulturas folder, and right there at the top, oh, there's all the documents that you have. But right there at the top is going to be that rubric. And again, it's a PDF. So I've got sections for all different parts of this IPA. And again, I can just snag that link, copy it, and paste it right in here. So anytime I want to quickly grab that rubric again and look at it, remember what it looks like, share it with my students, it's right there at the beginning. So I really like to look at that rubric as a teacher because I know when I'm looking at these IPAs later on, this is how I'm going to be evaluating them. And it's great to show those to your students and get them really comfortable with those rubrics as well. The more you use rubrics with your students, the more natural it will feel for them and for you as well. So now we have our context and our rubric. We are going to start looking at the individual tasks for this IPA. Remember, there's going to be 3 tasks, 1 in each mode of communication, and they're going to be interconnected. I'm going to start off by looking for that interpretive task. I'm going to head back to my flex text and scroll down back down to my Vive EntreCulturas description. And here I can see that the first task is that interpretive assessment, which is a listening. I could tell by those headphones. I'm going to read the brief description right here, and then I'm going to type it out quickly. So in this case, the student gets to listen to all the symptoms of their sick classmates and take notes. And there's a fillable PDF. I know that because I looked earlier. But again, if I click on this compass right here, all of my resources for that particular task are going to pop up. So there's the audio file they're going to listen to, and then this document that they're going to fill out, used to take notes. And this document is a PDF. So they're actually going to type their answers directly into there. So you can share it with them. You can assign it through the learning site. And because it's a PDF, I actually could have grabbed that link and thrown it in this document if I wanted to. All right, now we're going to look at the interpersonal task. So here I can see a brief description, see what those questions are going to be. They're going to have to answer. And if I click on that compass, it's going to pop up with all the related resources. So for this particular task, it's going to be a simulated conversation that's recorded. And I know that part of the reason I know that is because the audio clip is so long. So that 5 minutes is going to give them time for the computer to ask them questions and for them to respond and record it. They'll also have a document to help them plan it out a little bit.
Hey, Lexi, there was a question in the chat about where students can submit the PDF document once they've filled it out.
So it really depends on the learning management system that you're using. So personally, I used Google Classroom for a year, and I had students submit it Google Classroom. Then I used Canvas for a year and had students submit using Canvas. And honestly, if I can, I'm going to print it out and have students handwrite it and turn it in. So you can do that as well. There's lots of options for that. You can have them email it to you as well if you want to. Okay, so this interpersonal task, now the student is sick and they need to answer questions from their host mother about what to do. So that's that simulated recorded conversation that they're going to have. So now we're going to go down to that presentational task. And here's my description. Again, I can click on that compass and everything related to that task is going to pop up and write out my description here. So now the program director for this program has gotten sick and the student has to give them recommendations, leave them a message about what they can do to feel better. So again, I can click on those compasses to find everything. But if I know what's going to happen, I know what's coming, I can go to the content folder, go to my unit, go to that Vive EntreCulturas folder, and all the documents, everything I need, the tasks are all right here in this folder. So I have all those pasos, all those steps for that particular assessment. So yeah, I appreciate that question. There are several different ways you can have students submit those PDFs. And one thing that I did when I was teaching is I actually would just go to that folder, print out all the documents that were PDFs. I sat down, took the assessment myself, just because then I know exactly the experience that students will be having in a few weeks' time. And that really helps me figure out how I'm going to spend the next 6 weeks in class and what activities are going to be a good use of our time. Okay, so now we've got that integrated performance assessment. So the second part of step 2 is looking at our formative assessments. So in Spanish, those are called our En Caminos, and in French, they're called the J'avance formative assessments. So in Spanish too, we actually have 2 formative assessments. We're going to have En Camino A and En Camino B. In French, you'll have 3 formative assessments. So again, I'm going to head back to my flex text and scroll down and find En Camino A. That's going to have its own section in that table of contents right there. So I'm briefly going to read about this one. I could open all the documents, I could click on all those compasses, but right now I just kind of want to get an idea of what we're going to be doing. So in this particular In Camino, remember we're talking about food. Students are going to read a recipe from a blog. They're going to write their own recipes or research a recipe from the Caribbean. Then they're going to post them and read each other's and comment. I actually did this formative assessment with my students last year in distance learning, and we had a really good time with this assessment. It was very entertaining for them, and I liked reading them. I got a lot of mac and cheese recipes. Okay, so for In Camino Bay, that's our second formative assessment. Same thing, I'm just gonna read the little description here, figure out what we're doing, and go back, write up my description. So in this case, we're actually talking about health this time. So the student's on vacation in Puerto Rico, and they actually end up getting sick themselves. So they're going to need to go to the doctor. They'll have some scenarios to pick from. They're going to need to fill out some information. And then they're actually going to role play patient doctor with another student. So they're going to get some good interpersonal practice in there. And then they're going to need to write a blog with some recommendations. So the great thing about these formative assessments is that I can already tell just from those brief descriptions what vocab is going to be really important, and also which structures are going to be really important, because I know they're going to need to give recommendations, and they're also going to need to give directions for that recipe. So those are two things that I can really keep in my mind when I'm continuing to plan. All right, so that is step 2. Now we're going to move on to step 3, which I think all of us, our first inclination is to always start with step 3, because this is the fun stuff, right? These are the activities that we like to do, and the things that we keep from year to year and keep wanting to use. So we're going to go over our essential vocab and structures, some of our favorite activities and tasks, some key resources, and talk a little bit about differentiation and modification. So we're going to start with that essential vocabulary and essential structures. So to do that, I'm actually going to start in my flex text again. And after each In Camino, after each formative assessment, there will be a synthesis, like a review page of everything that's covered in that section. So after In Camino A, we'll find a synthesis. So here's the structures that were covered in that first part. And we'll also see some vocabulary that was covered in that part as well. I like to close that menu when I'm projecting this in class. So just a tip if you didn't know that menu collapsed. So here's all the vocab that we've covered in that first part. And then we'll go down and look at the second set of Gramática y Vocabulario that we saw in the second part of this chapter. So when I go back here, I'm not going to type out every single word that was in every single así se dice. I'm going to have those assessments in the back of my mind. So when I went over those assessments, which of all that vocab that I just saw is going to be really key for them to know, and also which of those structures that we looked at are going to be really important for those assessments. So I wouldn't make a huge list here. I just write down some bullet points of things I want to make sure that we get to. Another place that you can find some information like this, kind of like a summary of what's going to be covered. If you go to the content tab and then head to your resources and then go to your For Teachers tab, the Solo para Profesores, and then you go down to the scope and sequence. So this particular scope and sequence will have EntreCulturas 1, 2, y 3. And if you haven't looked at this yet, it's a great resource. So I'm going to go down to the EntreCulturas 2 one, find my unit. It's 2 pages, so this is just the first part. And it's a nice document that gives you a really good idea of what's coming up. Here you can see all the vocabulary topics and also all the structures that are going to be covered. And again, this is a PDF, so you can link this. I actually too would print this out and just have it hanging by my desk because it's nice to have that idea of, you know, here's what we did so far, here's where we're going. Nice little summary. So yeah, I grab that URL and I can just paste that into here so I can open that whenever I want to. You can also download it and save it to your Google Drive. That's what I did also. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our favorite activities and tasks. Just remember, if you have favorite things that you like to do, please continue to do those things. I mean, I think we all have those activities year after year that we like to pull out when we hit certain topics, especially this one is about food in El Caribe. I always did a tianguis project. Tianguis is like a market, like an open air market. And I would have students set up like fruit stands and they need to label everything and put prices on everything. So those kinds of activities that really make us excited to be with our students and make students excited to be there, we have to remember to put those down. So when you're unit planning, make sure that you prioritize those. But I'm going to give you a couple more ideas as well. If we head back to our learning site and scroll all the way to the top, click on Learning Tools. This link will come up for the Instructional Strategies Toolkit. And this is just a toolkit with a bunch of activities, ideas. You can see there's 205 results here. And you can actually use this menu to filter out different things. So my Spanish 2 class is going to be a novice class. And maybe we want to work on some speaking activities. So a bunch of activities that apply to those 2 categories will pop up. I've got 79 results. And if I scroll through here, I can see what there is, and I can also click on them. And when I click on them, it'll come up with a brief description, any type of external link that I'll want to go to, and also show you all the categories too. I really liked using the Instructional Strategies Toolkit last year. Like I was in hybrid at the end of the year in the spring, and I was just super burnt out, didn't have a lot of ideas, and I just randomly scrolled through the Instructional Strategies Toolkit every day and just found one activity and said, I'm going to try this today. And sometimes they were fantastic and sometimes they needed a little bit of work, but it was nice to have that bank of ideas there for me. You can also use the Instructional Strategies Toolkit for differentiation and modification if you have that in your classroom. So you can see here some of the categories. We've got learning styles you could filter by, Bloom's taxonomy. And also if you go down to more, there is a category for special needs. So keep that in mind as you're planning your unit. The last thing I want to show you here is key resources. Again, if you have those favorite videos, songs, any type of thing that you like to bring into your classroom, make sure you include those as well. For food, I love to show my students McDonald's menus from every Spanish-speaking country that we could find. So anything like that that you've used over and over again, please continue to do that. But I'm going to show you a great way to find more resources in the learning site. So I'm going to go back to my class here. And I can filter out the results from my folder. So if I click on this Unidad 4, I've got these search bars at the top. So I'm going to select my unit. And then you can search for all these different categories right here. So I'm going to scroll down and look at videos. I want to see all the videos that are in that unit. So I can find these through the content tab, but if I just want to search and see everything that's available, this is a quick and easy way to do that. So I can see all these videos that I have here. And I'm going to go search for another category. So I want to see what kind of external links there are. URLs are going to be websites outside of the learning site. So I can see some great websites here that I might want to use later on. A couple more things I just wanted to add about differentiation and modification. Some of the things that I did in my classroom to help to really support students. One thing was to download video or audio. Remember, you can download the video and audio, and I would share it with students either through Google Classroom or even email it to them. And that way they can listen to it on their own device as many times as they need to. Another thing you can do is if you assign those videos through the learning site, you can show students how to adjust the playback speed, and you can also add captions for them if they need that. Another thing that I frequently did was to make sure that I always provided sentence frames for students. So if they were doing any type of speaking or writing activity and they needed that extra support, I wanted to make sure I gave them part of that sentence done so that they at least felt like they had a way to start. And then I would modify the vocab list for them. So maybe, you know, there's 20 words and a couple así se dices. I might pare that down to the 10 most important words I want them to learn and give them a list with those 10 words on it. Now, if you really want to challenge your students and push them a little bit further, remember that on top of the así se dice or como dit-on essential vocabulary, we also have those extra vocab sections, the además se dice and the on peut aussi dire. So make sure you're including that vocab as well for those students. And another way that I challenge all students is ask them, can you extend that sentence? Can you add another action, another adjective, something else that's going to make that sentence a little bit more complex? All right, so now I've gotten through all 3 stages of my backward design process. And my next step is to get it on the calendar. So again, this is the calendar template that's in the workbook, and it's also in the folder that we've shared with you. So for me, I have an A/B schedule, so I know I'm going to see them every other day. I'm going to start off by putting my A/B days on there. Then I'm going to make sure I get my holidays on there. So President's Day is coming up. Hopefully I would never have this many 5-day weeks in a row, but you never know. So make sure you put all those extra days on there that you won't have class. Then I'm going to start off by putting that summative assessment on there. So that integrated performance assessment is going to go at my last week. And usually I gave 2 days. And because I have A/B periods, that would take about the whole week for both days to go through that IPA. And then I put my En Camino A formative assessment about halfway through. And then once I've got those pieces on my calendar, now I can start putting in the activities that are really important and the vocab sections that I really want to cover. All those things are going to fall into place a little bit easier. The other thing to keep in mind, you might not stick to this timeline, and that's okay. Things happen, classes take longer than you think that they're going to. So I always push my calendar out a little bit. But at least knowing that I had 6 weeks or about 6 weeks planned out helped keep me to a timeline, because otherwise I'd go 8 weeks, 12 weeks, I'd really get into it and then lose track of time. So it's nice to help yourself out and just have an idea of some dates on there. All right, now Kate's going to talk to us about our current situation in the world.
Well, thanks, Lexi. That was an absolutely amazing breakdown of the unit planning process. So like Lexi just said, sometimes we have to be a little bit anticipating change, you know, in light of everything that's going on right now. Sometimes it can be really challenging to make a solid unit plan and know that it'll work out. We know that there are schools out there that are switching back and forth to distance learning, and some teachers have to miss school, unfortunately. And we hope that everybody stays healthy, but we also know that some of our students aren't able to come to school, and some have to virtual learn, and some have to do hybrid. And we understand the situation. So we've actually left some blank boxes at the bottom of the template for you. So that way you have a space to maybe brainstorm some asynchronous ideas or activities or strategies that might be useful for that unit. You can definitely use the instructional strategies toolkit for that as well. The other box could be a brainstorm area for substitute plans or something along those lines. And many of us probably don't have substitutes that speak the language. So it's a good idea to have a backup plan for certain situations. Now, with that being said, we do want to help you out. So stay tuned. We might be sharing some asynchronous plans with you in the very near future. So check social media and check our Facebook page, and we'll share some really great resources with you in the next week or so. So we do want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. And we know we threw a lot of information at you at once, but remember this was recorded, so feel free to watch it back, take your time, and just know that we're here to support you along the way. So we know that this has been very challenging for teachers, so we'd love to hear from you of how we could support you better moving forward. So if you do have a couple minutes before we finish up today, we'd love it if you could take our exit survey and just give us some feedback. We want to plan some really great sessions for you in the future, so we want to hear from you, and you can tell us what you need.
We'll put that survey link in the chat in a minute here.
Yep. And Jean, I just saw that question. Yes, it is that first session and our second session that we record today are going to be on the Wayside Publishing Professional Development website. That link we put in the chat a little bit earlier, but we can have Kelsey throw it in there again. You'll be able to watch the first session and this session. It'll probably be posted tomorrow or the next day. So finally, we took some time to really learn the importance of good unit planning. Lexi just walked us through what it looks like in real life. And now we're going to challenge you. So over the course of the next week, we would love for you to put this into your own practice. Next week, we're going to ask you to come join us again on Thursday, the 27th, for our final installment of our 3-part PD. So we're taking sort of a coffee talk approach, and we're going to invite you to come maybe with a finished product or something that's partially done, or and collaborate with other teachers and ask them questions, ask us questions, and discuss maybe the challenges or successes that you ran into along the way while you were planning. So we really hope to see you all there again, and we can give you some feedback on your lesson plans and so on. So that's going to be a really, really great session. Now we are getting close to time, and we do want to just leave it open for a couple minutes for questions, but we want to let you know that we have some really good stuff coming up as well. So next month, for the month of February, we have this great foundation of what a unit plan should look like. So now we're going to take it one step further, and we're going to focus in on IPAs. So we're going to follow the same model, a 3-part series. And on our first session, we're going to show you the 4 reasons we love IPAs. And that's going to be February 8th. In our Apply It section, similar today, we're going to walk you through how to plan an IPA with your students. We're going to provide you a free IPA template, similar to what you saw today, where you can plug and play along the way using EntreCulturas or EntreCultures. Finally, we'll come back together on February 24th in a collaboration mode. And we're actually going to invite some successful users of IPAs to come and chat with us and give us some pointers. So you can come with a finished product, we can give you some feedback, or you could ask some questions to those who have a great deal of experiences using and implementing IPAs. So that registration will be up in just a week or so. Once the January sessions are completed, we'll put the registration information up on our professional development website, on the Wayside Publishing website for you there.
All right. Do we want to take a couple questions? Kelsey, do we have questions?
There was a question about the midterm and final exam resources and if there were any available.
Oh yeah. I will open my my learning site here. So if I go into, I'll go back to EntreCulturas 2. In my resources folder, and then in my Solo para Profesores, there's going to be this folder of midterm and final exams material. So you'll find more in there to help you out as well. So you can see there's a ton of different sample assessments. So for example, if I want to find a Unit 1 interpersonal assessment, it's going to be right in here. And these are really nice. Like if you have a student that needs to do a retake and you don't want to rewrite something, this is a great place to find an alternative for them. Some of these you really like, you could even use that for a placement assessment. We've done that as well. So these are great resources to look at.
And just one thing to add to that is that these are all going to be performance assessments. So they're not going to be your typical, fill in the blank or type quiz and test that you may have seen in those more traditional style teaching practices. Right, we have some more questions coming in.
Yes. There was a question about sharing unit goals and can-do statements with students, and when would be a good time to share that?
I think it's a great idea. And actually some schools require you to have them on your whiteboard. I don't know if schools still do that, but I've definitely taught in schools where they wanted you to do that. And the other thing to remember too, I'll go into the student textbook. Right here in the unit opener, they have those unit goals and preguntas esenciales, those essential questions right there. So I think it's a great idea when you go into a unit and you're just about to start, maybe do some type of activity with students where you're looking at these pictures and doing some kind of picture talk in the target language. And then you could dive into those unit goals and preguntas esenciales, do some kind of like KWL chart, like a know, want to know, and then later learn or want to learn. Do some kind of exploration like that with those essential questions and unit goals before you even get started. And then students might realize, hey, I already actually know some things about this topic, and here's what I want to find out while we go through this.
We have also had a couple of questions in regards to the timing of IPAs. Earlier, we had a question about how much time it takes to implement an IPA, and we're getting some questions now about the amount of time it takes to correct these types of assessments and provide feedback.
So I recommend coming in February because we're really going to dive into that topic. But I will briefly say, remember that there's three parts to that assessment. There's the interpretive, the interpersonal, and the presentational. My question, just to think about, do you need to report on all three of those every single unit? Because one workaround that I had, because it can be time consuming, I might have students do the interpretive part together. Like I might have them listen to something together. And then we would use the interpersonal task as something that I was assessing, that I was actually putting in a grade for. And then they might do the presentational later at home as a homework assignment. So you can really break these up and do them at different parts, maybe not all together in class, but maybe have them do some independently, some with a partner, and not necessarily enter a grade for each part every time.
We also had a question about rubrics and if there are rubrics for those IPAs and where they could be found if there are rubrics.
One of my favorite things about teaching with EntreCulturas was that there are rubrics written for every IPA. Every integrated performance assessment is going to have its own rubric. So if I go to the content folder and I go to the unit, and then I go down to Vive EntreCulturas, I will find my rubric for that assessment right here. And I don't know about everybody here, but I struggled for years trying to find rubrics that made me happy. And you know that you find a perfect rubric and then it might not work for a different assessment. So it's nice to have these pre-written rubrics for these specific assessments.
Right, and we also have rubrics for all of the formative assessments as well, in 2 different formats for the Spanish book and 3 different formats for our French book. So we have all these wonderful rubrics that you can use available on the learning site.
Yeah, there's a rubric folder.
And then there was just one other question that I saw come through. When it comes to planning a lesson for a 90-minute block, how many activities are recommended for, say, a 90-minute block or say a 50-minute block?
I think it really depends on the activity, because some activities are going to be one part and then some activities will have multiple pasos or multiple steps. And I know that that's challenging when you first start planning because you don't know how much to plan for. I'm an over planner. I would always over plan. And if we didn't get to everything, that's fine. I'd rather be over plan than under plan. But the more the rhythm that you get, if you're just starting out with EntreCulturas or EntreCultures, the more you work through, the more you'll start to get a sense of how long different activities will take. So just be forgiving with yourself if you're just starting out and know, hey, no matter what activity we're doing or how long it's taking, we're practicing the target language and that's what we're here for.
And another thing to say is that there's probably no way you're going to get through every single activity and every single paso in every single unit. And it's okay. It's okay that you don't do that. As long as you're preparing them for that IPA in that mindset of backwards design, there's going to be those essential activities, some nice to do activities, and maybe the ones that you know that you can skip over. And that's all okay.
And we've also had a question come through about, Lexi, this was specifically for you in your block schedule. Did you do En Camino A and Bay with your students, or did you just do one of them?
Oh yeah, that's a great question, because on that calendar, I didn't have En Camino Bay in there. So personally, what I did, I used the En Camino A halfway through. And then if I didn't get to the En Camino Bay, I didn't stress it. But one thing I did do with it was, if I had time, we would actually do the En Camino Bay together in class. I wouldn't say, hey, this is assessment. I didn't say any of that. I just said, hey, we're going to do this activity today. Gave them, I printed out the documents, gave it to them. We all did it together. Then we all looked at a rubric and looked at it together. And that way they're kind of getting a practice assessment without even knowing that that's what we're doing. So that was one way that I used that in Camino Bay.
And then following up on that, did you give other assessments throughout the units besides the En Camino A or En Camino Bay and the Vida EntreCulturas?
Personally, yeah, I mean, and it really depends on your department. So for example, if I'm in a department where, you know, they've been giving this one, you know, grammar quiz for years and we're still going to do that, then I would give those types of things. Like I incorporated that into my classroom. But I really tried to focus my students' attention on the IPAs and the formative assessments in language production, and really trying to focus more on rubrics and also what they're able to do with the language. So that conversation shifted more from, because I mean, I was going through that process the whole time I was, you know, basically the whole 10 years I was teaching, of trying to be more proficiency based. So I'm trying to move them away from those conversations of like, oh, did I get half a point here? And did I miss this accent here? And more into conversations of, I was able to write all these extended sentences. I was able to answer this question using only Spanish. So that was really more of what I was trying to get at. And so in order to give like little mini assessments along the way, it would be things like exit tickets where, you know, write about how you felt about this activity today, or what did you get after we did this activity in class?
We have also had some questions coming through, again, relating back to IPAs and assigning grades to IPAs. Do you have any tips or suggestions about how to translate rubric feedback to a numeric grade?
So that's another thing that we're definitely going to cover in February, because that's going to be a more in-depth conversation. So I'm going to defer that to February. I apologize.
So we are approaching that final few minutes mark. Lexi, would you mind putting our email addresses up on the screen so that people can reach out to us? All right, so this is Lexi's email and my email, and we're here to walk you through this. We're here to support you. So if there's a question that comes up tomorrow, the next day, next week, by all means, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help you in any way we possibly can. We're so happy that you were here with us today. Again, we'd love to see you with us next week, and again in February when we talk about the IPAs. And just remember, we're here for you. We feel for you, and we really do hope that you got something out of today, and hope to see you all next week. And thank you for flying with us.